Hi everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Revenue Hacks with me, Christina Ridge, and of course our two lovely presenters as well, Ali and Suzanne. This week we're a trio, normally 4 or 5 depending on who's available, but unfortunately Olga and B can't join us today, so hi ladies if you're watching. So we'll just do our normal quick recce around the room to say who we are, what we do, and then we'll jump into it. This week we're talking about progressive pricing, which is something we are very excited about. The future is huge and bright for pricing when it comes to hotels. So Ali, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep, Ali Northfield, Managing Director of Revenue by Design. We provide hotels with revenue management outsource solutions, and we also provide training in revenue management, both online and in workshops. Thank you.
And Suzanne.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Williams. I'm the Revenue and Systems Director here at Journey in Cheltenham. We do outsourced revenue management, commercial strategy, marketing, websites and tech.
So no better two women to have on this panel today. I'm so excited because pricing is something we're all very much involved in and love so much. And as you know, I'm Christina Ridge, I'm a Group Revenue Manager for a hotel company here in the UK and Ireland. And let's get cracking. So progressive pricing, future, technology, where everything is going. What are your thoughts on how pricing is going to progress over the next while, Ali? What is your thought process on it?
Okay, fundamentally, I think that that there's this sort of chasm between the concept of rates management and pricing overall, and I think that overall pricing strategies tend to get lost in the crowd a little bit, particularly when responding to market conditions such as today. But I think the future of pricing is very much focused now on trying to get pricing that relates to the behavioural aspects of how consumers approach buying a hotel room and all of the elements that go alongside that. So the experience, what kind of experience they're looking for, how that's delivered, and also in terms of the customer journey, how the pricing is delivered to them at any one time, either at the initial research phase or through to the decision phase. So moving, I guess, towards the concept of personalised pricing, although technically that's really challenging for hotels, just in terms of the concept of personalised pricing. If it was an individual spot price for each person, I think is something which is way down the line. But certainly getting pricing to a point where the price point that's delivered based on what you have shown that you're interested in, what you're indicating that you want to buy, is certainly much closer. So that I see pricing being focused on very much the individual consumer. How about you, Suzanne?
Yeah, I can agree that the behavioural side of pricing is actually right now one of the most important things. I also think that the hospitality industry, we're certainly going in the right direction when it comes to that progressive pricing piece, the technology, real-time pricing, attribution pricing. I think all these things were progressing, but actually, just like you mentioned, given the market conditions, well, the bottom's fallen out of that, and hotels really need to get their house in order with making sure that they've got a pricing strategy. What is it? Does it relate correctly to their brand position? Does it relate correctly to the market? And are they truly looking at the price versus value, the strengths and weaknesses, and how that's translated? But I think that when we were talking, you mentioning the discounting aspect of it, how that's put forward to the guests. I think a lot of hotels could really benefit from that theory.
Yeah, so we were discussing earlier about the psychology of pricing and the concept of loss aversion versus gain, and I think something that kind of like tend to disappear in the mist when we're looking at sort of day-to-day rates management. But basically, as human beings, we're far more sensitive to losing out on pricing, and our reaction to that is far stronger than it is to gain. So when we talk about losses and gains, if you imagine that, for example, you've got a hotel that offers a rate of say £100, but then says I'm going to produce a surcharge, or I'm going to charge you a surcharge of £20 on this rate. So the total rate is going to be £120. The concept of a surcharge to anybody is basically a loss. So we typically we are not we're not really drawn to rates which offer a surcharge. However, if you had a hotel that was offering you a rate of £140 and then said, I can offer you a discount of £120 to make that rate the same rate as the surcharged rate, maybe say that's also the same room style, the same type of experience that you'd have, most people would go for the 140 minus the 20 because they feel there's a gain. There's this reference price of 140 they've been given, and therefore they're getting something for less. And we need to really bear that in mind as we walk through our strategies on a day-to-day basis. I think the thing to realize here is as much the fact that when we talk about gains in terms of offering discounts to people, very often a very small gain is viewed as with as much appreciation and is responded to in the same way as quite a large gain. And I think in a market like today, we have to be super careful not to over promise in terms of discounting, because there isn't that much need to. So this whole scenario speaks to really understanding the concept of price elasticity and the response to different changes in pricing. But I think the thing to point out here really is, if you feel that you're in a market that needs to discount, and I know there are markets where, particularly the leisure market at the moment, where you really don't. But there are other markets in city centres where there is this attitude that demand should be captured at any rate, and I feel that that is at the moment not. I mean, clearly there's a necessity to get cash into the business, but I think if you're thinking more strategically about your pricing, then really think about the fact that the concept of gain and the level of discount are not linear. So it is not to say that the more you discount, the more people you're going to get to actually buy the product. I guess sort of like trying to sort of like position it most simply is when we look at, for example, an advanced purchase rate. We position an advanced purchase rate as a gain. Basically, if you buy this rate early, you get a discount, and basically the idea is that people feel that they're in a position of gain through the advanced purchase. If we were to flip that on its head and look at the concept of loss as a very simplistic example, then if we were to position our rates as if you don't buy early, I'm going to surcharge you up until the day of arrival, that just wouldn't work. So I just wanted to kind of like try and give you some examples of kind of like how that loss versus gain works in the consumer's minds. And also don't over discount, because it's just it's not necessarily going to give you the results that you need from a psychological perspective from the guest point of view.
I think for sure you've really hit the nail on the head when you've mentioned discounting, both of you, because what we're seeing in London at the moment, and even in Ireland and in the major cities like Dublin, is that everyone is using price management as a strategy. That is not a strategy. And all you're doing is creating a war. Like, for instance, in central London at the moment, you can get a hotel room for £37, £40, and that's not even a Premier Inn or a Travelodge. You know, that's proper internationally branded hotels, which is scary. And the same thing here in Ireland, £45 on a bank holiday Sunday in Dublin. Totally unheard of. And I think that's because people are, just as you said, Ali, needing to get cash flow in, but we need to also be careful with our pricing and how we do it, because just before the call, Ali mentioned that it took almost 10 years after the last crash for people to recover to a certain area where it was kind of called a price. And we're just going to start that evolution again, and we're going to have to start building it. So if you've got people who are willing to pay 80 and 90 pounds for a stay, why should you discount that to 40, 50, 60% off? You know, the OTAs are going to do that in a way, and that's something we are going to touch on, is the progressiveness of the pricing and how it's changing the evolution, which is something that I know Suzanne's company is working on. The airlines have been working on for a long time, and we did sit here yesterday saying, why can't we do this? You know, it's something that, you know, we would love to be able to do as a company or as a tech world in hospitality, but it's not there yet. And that's where we need to figure out between us where we can go with that evolution. You know,
I think that's why when it comes to the tech side of hospitality, it can be really painful. So when we're talking about progressive pricing, if we aren't realistic about what can be delivered and when, then we shouldn't do it, because it causes such a lot of pain with interfaces, time's absorbed, there's blame games going on. It's quite hard work, when actually, if we just considered, first and foremost, what our brand position is, what the value is, and making sure that our rates are structured correctly in order to adopt different strategies in order to maximise when that demand does come through. And the thing that I'd add on to that when it comes to, Ali, your point about the gain-loss theory, is that if you've got a robust marketing action behind every inquiry or your web behaviour, or you're actually adopting technology that can track guest behaviour, that you can use, that you can retarget, then you can really put that into place. That's something that actually, from a sales conversion perspective, will really work. If you know that a guest has visited your offers page 3 times, then let's get some personalised communication out to them that set, your published price is 140. Well, you visited 3 times. We know that you're an interested hot lead. Let's take £20 off that. And when you understand that, 1, your market's behaving a certain way, 2, that you're priced accordingly, then the third thing to do is hit back with some excellent marketing actions that are really going to drive that conversion. If we approach this time now with these simple measures, then you're going to make sure that when that demand is there, it's going to be bums in beds, it's going to work, that conversion is going to come through.
I do like what you said about the pricing, Suzanne, there, because that's actually really, it's a really good way of being able to actually offer a rate to the guest if they've been on your page a few times. And that's something, again, our magical partners in the OTA world do. They send you reminders to say that your room is sitting there. It's like if you shop on Amazon, it tells you you've got stuff in your basket. We as hoteliers should be able to do that with our own technology. And that involves having sexy tech, a really cool big CRM that's able to do that, that's able to integrate with you and do that for you. There is some really cool ones on the market. We did see one yesterday. B showed us one yesterday, and we were all very interested in that when it came to pricing and everything, which is super cool. But again, it's the CRM aspect, it's the expensive tech aspect that hotels just don't want to invest in 100% as well, even though we're screaming for it. They just don't want to invest in it. And as B so rightly said, you can test these products as well for quite some time to actually see if you think it's worth the investment or not. But I definitely think a better targeted remarketing needs to be done in the future. I don't know, Ali, if you agree with that about remarketing in the future.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think certainly we are seeing attempts by a number of players in the tech area that are using behavioural properties to either serve pages which make more sense when somebody returns to the web to the pages that they visited before. So we know that Avio with Alora is doing something along those lines, which makes the visit to the website far more relevant and clearly works to improve conversions. I know Suzanne and Journey are doing a lot along those lines. I think the thing to remember is, from my perspective at the moment, I'm just fascinated with the concept of pricing and how the psychology of pricing kind of like fits into what we're trying to do. The thing that we forget is that our normal rate strategy is based on what we call rational pricing. If you look at things like a bar strategy, it's totally rational. If X happens in terms of occupancy, we do Y. That doesn't take into consideration the fact that somebody is likely to behave very, very differently depending on what kind of pricing you put forward to them. And I think this is where the key is to capture the hearts and minds of consumers. So we've all been in a situation where, for example, we have a mental budget in mind, and this is what we never create a rate strategy around a mental budget, but everybody has a mental budget. So if I go out and buy a hotel room, I might have a mental budget in my head, and say that's for the sake of argument, again, 100 quid. So say I've got the £100 mental budget in my head, and I find the room that I'm looking for, which fits all of my needs for £80. I have a mental surplus then of £20, which I'm then going to spend on something else. So it's this concept of consumer surplus that's really, really difficult to add to the equation and to add in, because often unless we are really, really good at targeted marketing, and this is where the targeting comes in, then we have to really understand kind of like the behavioral conditions around all of our guests. And if we don't have that really good targeted marketing, we're not going to get there. So getting technology to understand that psychology of how people behave is challenging. A really good pricing strategy, if you have a really good pricing strategy, you can balance the consumer surplus and the need for somebody, or the desire for people to have a little bit of surplus in terms of what they're buying versus our own surplus. So our surplus as hoteliers is we need to basically make money. So anything over and above our costs is our surplus. Now those two, if you can fit those two together and you're balancing your need as a hotelier to make money versus also the need to kind of offer a little bit of consumer surplus to your target market, then you have what would be called a robust, very clear, very understandable pricing strategy to the target market that you want to attract. And getting that right is hugely challenging, and particularly if you don't have any technology to help you, it's super challenging. But a good revenue manager really understands the target market that they're talking to. They understand the need to actually play with that strategy to balance the two. And also to shift target markets as you get to a higher rate. There are certain target markets that will disappear. People will not be able to afford you. So then you need to change, and your marketing needs to change, and the tech needs to change to support that. So yeah, truly challenging, really exciting. But and I don't think it's something, to your point, Christina, when we talk about rates management, when do people think about that level of psychology that comes into it? Who am I going to really disenfranchise if I put this rate up? So it's having that understanding.
I love the way, Ali, you took it completely to the next level. So you've done what Suzanne does every week. Suzanne does this every week. We mention something very small, and then Suzanne just goes, boom. I think you've just done the mic drop now, unless Suzanne's going to come back with something else.
Actually, everything you've just said, Ali, what it's really brought forward for me is we've talked about, revenue management, and it's, it can sometimes be a bit dry. It's not very sexy. People aren't necessarily that interested in it because revenue managers navel gaze, don't they? The perception is that they navel gaze on occupancy rates and messing about with pricing, when actually what you've just said in terms of the behaviour, the pricing strategies, flexing them, is exactly what a good revenue manager does. It's how they work together with marketing, how they inform the data, how they really pull it together and make sure that you've got that high sales conversion. That, I think, in a nutshell, is why we should be shouting from the rooftops about bringing people in to revenue management as a career. So that was on point for me.
Perfect.
Absolutely. And it is, we spoke about this yesterday. If you drop your rate by £5 or £4, is it really going to tap into the customer psyche to come and book you? Yeah. 9 times out of 10 it won't. It's about knowing your market. And I love how Ali just instantly mentioned about shutting out different markets as you're going along, because we do know that there's a lot of markets who will pay a higher price, especially the Nordics and Scandinavians, compared to what or domestic market will pay when it comes down to it. Interesting conversation we're going to open up now. It's about attribute pricing. We did have a question from Ronald, who actually jumped in ahead of us about it. We did touch on it in one of our last episodes, and there's a link going at the bottom of the screen. So if you have missed out on all the old Revenue Hacks episodes 1 to 17, I think it is, it's there on YouTube or else on LinkedIn. You're able to see them. Also, don't forget to tag us on your social media, and you can actually also book appointments with us. If you want to have a chat about revenue management, about career development, or any of the tools that we all work with. So the question that from Ronald is that he's read articles just before COVID in regards to attribute pricing and product pricing online. That will be the next pricing strategy. What are our thoughts, and will it work with the OTAs? Suzanne, you loved this yesterday.
Right. So I think it's hard to know exactly what the question is because we don't know what articles Ronald has read specifically. But one of the very first things we do when we look at a hotel in terms of their pricing is we look at all the features and attributes and what the value of those features and attributes are and how we include it in their overall pricing strategy, which means that we automatically, it happens every time, we change everything usually and bring it straight into line and giving it back to Ali's point about rationale and logic. However, there's a little bit more innovation than just kind of flexing your pricing and managing your inventory. So I guess the challenge here is when you think about the base rates, the packages, the features, the attributes, and how you consider what is of value, what's of value to your guest, how do you price it, where do you include it, how do you distribute it, how do you get the message across to your guests? These are all the things for me that I'm like, right, let's get into this. That would be an exciting challenge. I think that's something that's absolutely worth getting amongst. Now, we are at Journey, we're a tech business, and our tech platform is very much about that attribute pricing. It's about your base room and then building and adding up your own experience so that it's completely personalised. And if you think about, when I first started thinking about that as a pricing model, I thought that's never going to work. how's that ever going to work? What about packages? What about tactical promotions? What about bed and breakfast rates? People aren't going to want that, when actually that's exactly what people want. They want to be able to build their own experience, especially when you're talking about the luxury market where we sit. People want to do their own thing. They don't want to be forced down the package route where, the stale afternoon tea that's been sitting out for 2 hours is, no, people don't want that. And I think that actually, we're talking about progressive pricing, we're talking about personalisation. The attribute pricing fits really nicely into that. The big question for me is, how do we communicate that through our distribution platforms? And will it mean that pricing strategies in the future become a lot simpler?
I think it's almost like, though, for me in the back end of tech, and I'm just looking at a PMS, is that it's built almost like how you built a package in your PMS when you were building a rate, and it just picks the different things. It's all, to me, I think eventually hotel technology will almost be like a shopping basket. So when the booking drops into your PMS, it pulls the accommodation rate, it pulls the F&B things you've put into it, or the spa treatments you've put into it, and then it will all just magically sit there in the reservation. I'd like to think that's going to happen. Probably not in our lifetime, by the way. But I do think that that's something really cool and funky about it, because we should be able to manipulate and change things as we feel fit, or as we see fit to our needs. We should be able to tailor something to our needs. If you pick up the phone, 9 times out of 10, you can call a hotel and they'll be able to do some things for you that you can't do online. But there's always extra charges, and there's always different kind of feedback. Oh, well, it's a little bit difficult to do this, and you did book this package. And I think we as hoteliers and reservationists need to change our mindset as well on that it's pretty much a barrier to a customer.
But the thing is, it's that, if you think about it from the GM perspective and the packages, now, Ali, I'm sure you've had this conversation with owners and GMs over and over again, package elements, package allowances and package elements, the value of that room cost versus what the hotel are actually valuing are completely different things. The demanding chef that wants full allocation for his dinner, his breakfast, his afternoon tea just diminishes your rate more and more, and that's something that the guest doesn't see. They don't see that value passed on. So there's so many factors here that's why I always bring it back to the simplest, most logical, rational, easiest way to get your house in order and then progress from there. I just think that hospitality needs strong marketing, strong messages, good communication, and that value, when it's there in the package elements, £45 and you're getting 50 for your room, let's communicate it and personalise the whole experience.
Yeah, I guess. I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, are you still?
No. I just think that there's so many different routes that you can go down with pricing that it's not always crystal clear to the guest what that strategy is, and I think it should be.
Mm-hmm. I was going to talk about just the attribute pricing based technology. I mean, certainly there are, I know Saber's been working on that in terms of allowing guests to basically add whatever attributes are available as per the hotel's direction. I think that the challenge, Christina, is right, that a lot of the time the actual operational delivery of the different attributes that people have selected is really, really challenging, and it's where the intersection between different technologies just doesn't work effectively. I think if you look at some of the more network-based property management systems that are coming out, which rely more on this, having a central core of functionality and using apps to basically deliver any other elements of the guest experience that the hotel wants to wrap around that particular property management system. So an Apaleo type approach is interesting, but I think still that the operational side is challenging. That if technology can deliver lots of different things, doesn't mean to say that you can actually operationally deliver on the elements, which is a shame, because from a consumer perspective, it doesn't make sense that you can't, because they can see that everything is available. So why can't you do that?
I think we had an interesting comment from Ina, who said that we just need to be careful that we don't overdo it in regards to the email marketing. Yeah. Because obviously the OTAs are going too far with it and overwhelming in their messages, and the websites, in her opinion, and in the luxury market especially, the guests don't need to get 5 emails asking them to finish their hotel booking, which I completely understand. However, as a hotelier and a distribution specialist, you need to find some way to combat the OTAs and what they're doing. and stop the OTAs taking that huge market share that you want. So you need to be able to do something different to the guest rather than the constant badgering from booking.com, make it a little bit more quirky, a little bit tailor-made, rather than just what the OTAs are doing across their channels. What's your thoughts on that though, Suzanne?
No, I do agree, and I think that if you're in the luxury market, you're never going to badger your guests to sell your rooms like a commodity the way the OTAs do. I think that's the point of the OTA. Your room is not a brand position; it is a price, and it's a room that you're selling. You're not going down the mine of the overwhelming experience. Whereas if you've got a guest that's come to visit your website, your brand website, then they are a little bit more engaged, and you've got an opportunity to do a bit of storytelling behind that, where you've got your social platforms, you're engaging in an experience, not a commodity sale. So I completely agree, guests should not be badgered, and actually the parameters that sit around those rules for retargeting should be really stringent and very much in line with your brand position.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's like annoying. It really is.
Yeah. I think also bear in mind that the consumer attitudes today, or the consumer approaches to travel. I mean, there's so much uncertainty right now around whether or not people can travel. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be facing some sort of self-isolation when they get back? That said, I think we can be intelligent about the extended time between typically the initial research phase of a booking and the actual booking date. I think there's stuff that we can be doing in between that, and also frequently, perhaps not quite so much now, but the time between the book date and the stay date, and communications between both of those two time frames need to be managed really quite intelligently, so that again, you're not irritating the guests, but you're actually serving them with things that could make sense. So if you haven't got attribute-based pricing and the ability to deliver on that, at least you can start serving up attributes once the guest is actually booked, and ideally getting them, which is obviously typically an upsell strategy, but with a level of sensitivity surrounding that at the moment.
But I kind of find that the pre-stay emails are gone in a lot of cases. Like, I've stayed in a lot of properties over the last staycation time since COVID. The pre-stay emails are gone. I remember getting pre-stay emails and being so particular about sending them out, where you were able to upgrade and change and modify. That just doesn't seem to be the case now. Is that because people have stopped investing in the technology, or do you think it's just because the right people aren't there to control all this?
Probably the right people aren't there, to be fair.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, yeah.
And anybody that does have the budget, they're investing in apps.
Yeah.
It's far more valuable, isn't it? Whereas real time.
When you say apps, I'm very excited because we talked about this yesterday, and the question is, where does the data come from? IP tracking and geo tracking in our guests. Because Suzanne, you mentioned something earlier on today on a call about touch points and people, the customer not realizing they're touching on something a few times on your website, and they kind of automatically go up a tier to get a further discount. The airlines have been doing this for quite some time. If you click on and you're looking at the price for 3 days, and it could be the same price, and then you go back to book it, it could either be a little bit cheaper or it could be more expensive. We know some of this is supply and demand, but we also know it's IP based, and the OTAs are very much the same. What are your thoughts on that towards the future? Do you think that there's a way that it's more accessible for small tech companies or big tech companies to gain this information at a lesser of a cost, or even a hotel? Or do you think we're actually miles away from that just yet?
I think that there's an intermediate position that a smaller hotel can adopt if they have a good CRM system. And it kind of leads me back to my life as, director of sales, where you're thinking about lead scoring. And actually what you can do is look at the behaviour online and actively drive said behaviour, create landing pages, create offers, create tactical promotions, market them, and then watch the behaviour of the guest, so that when they do hit those lead scores, then they are served a more personalised product. But you have to define it. It's not like every single individual guest is going to get an individual price, but you put parameters behind it again. It's the old-fashioned lead scoring, and I guess it would take a bit of innovative thinking to get it up and running, and how you would link your CRM to your PMS, whether that's possible. But there are systems out there that do it, and you could just think a little bit differently, especially going into October, November and December, but when you really need that sales conversion to happen, how can we just think a bit more progressively about how we do it? And for me, that's actually quite an easy step. Lead score your guests, then attribute your price points to it and the various different package propositions and market them out that way, so that you're understanding the behaviour better. And to Ali's point about pricing, but you're also hooking it up with marketing to convert the sale. Because that's
your thoughts?
That's important.
I think certainly in terms of tracking customer behavior, IP tracking, or typically like an Amazon like shopping experience. I noticed that Sylvia Cantarella's got the comment and that she's put in regarding progressive pricing being like an Amazon like shopping experience. I think the technology is there. I think it's only a matter of time, and I think it's probably going to be some kind of breakthrough, more of a breakthrough technology from someone like an Amazon or a Google. Definitely, I don't see that the headspace for hotel technology is quite there to do it from our perspective. I think one thing we do need to be careful of, though, is that you can have the law of unintended consequences with this type of pricing, whereby you're delivering individualized prices to different people. And you can unintentionally create antagonism towards a brand or some level of customer dissent, purely when people find out that somebody else has got a very similar deal but it's cheaper. And so we need to be super careful about that, because you can find that you could deliver the most attribute-full proposition to a guest, and they could say, right, yeah, that's brilliant, that's exactly at my mental budget, that's totally at my reference price point, or however you want to put it. But then when they meet someone in either on the golf course or in the spa or in the bar, and that second guest says, well, no, I got a similar package for less, then you've got a customer service issue on your hands, which you just weren't expecting. You've done nothing wrong. Basically, the consumer was with you all the way. They bought the deal. But it's only through no fault of your own, because pricing is pricing and the operation side is the operation side. You suddenly got yourself an issue. And I just think that we just need to be aware of that at different times. It happens.
I love how you say that, Ali, because that just brings the Trivago ad to my attention again. And we've seen it. They've had branded hotels in there, independent hotels, boutique hotels on their ads through the years. And that is the case. And I think if hotels are using the geo-targeting options on the OTAs, then you need to really start looking at it in your CRM to be able to do something similar. Mm-hmm. We've always been saying this anyways, parity across the board, but it goes without saying there's a lot of systems that can't do that. And you need to then start being smarter with your pricing and stop doing that, because all you're doing is liquidating yourself in a market that may not have even traveled to you, and you're only using that then just to gain one person. And as Ali said, you're causing then parity with your clients and customer service issues.
But the retail experience part of that Sylvia mentioned earlier, I think is spot on, isn't it? It's about adding those things to the basket, personalising the experience, and then checking out. Then you're never going to have the scenario where that package price, which seems actually now quite old-fashioned. If you think about moving, that old package of you're paying this amount, you're staying this, and there's something about that now that just doesn't feel like it's progressive. When actually, if you can personalise the experience, choose what you want, and then there's varying discounts that come based on what you've chosen, because it surely has got to be the way forward. And equally, like real-time pricing, how do we get that real-time pricing to feed through into our own display ads on Google? I know that SiteMinder were beta testing in the States the real-time pricing, so that we can actually publish the exact rate live on our Google ads. I'd like to see that come to fruition. I think that's another big tick for progressive pricing.
That's really interesting, because actually I have that as well in my notes about SiteMinder doing that, Suzanne. I think though as well, that all comes down to hotels and how their systems are set up as well, because if you've got a hotel with 100 or 200 rates in the system, that's going to not go live right away. That's going to be 10, 20, 30 minutes, depending on their internet setup as well. So it's kind of, it's a mindset where, I'm thinking of it in rural Ireland, for instance, where I'm sitting. The internet here isn't great. I'm actually shocked I'm still live. You know what I mean? And that's where it kind of comes to not having live pricing, because we could change a price here and it could take 20 minutes, 30 minutes for it to update everywhere else. That's so frustrating, because your last room could be gone for like €100 when you could have sold it for €200. Not that that's the way, but I'm just using it as an example. And it's just that perspective of it, because I know Ali's like, don't be saying that. But I think for me personally, I would love if we could scrap packages. I know a lot of hotels have scrap packages through the years because they just don't work anymore unless you're a spa hotel or a luxury boutique market that kind of work. And that's one of the things I'd love to change for sure, is how people buy things. And the only person who I can think really is going to do this 110% is going to be Amazon. I'm putting it out there. I don't think it's going to be Google. I don't think they're in that space for that. Now, they could surprise me, but I think the one person who understands customer psyche, psychological shopping is Amazon for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm just looking at a comment. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
No, I'm just looking at a comment here from Monica, who's if you don't mind. So she's saying, just to give a different perspective, consumers are okay with knowing everyone on a flight has paid paid differently for the seat. I mean, yes, we are, but no, not really. I think, if you miss out on a really good deal, it's a bit frustrating. But I would suggest that I think the fundamental difference here is that hotel is an experience. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never sat on a plane as everybody gets off and say, let's spend an extra 3 hours on the plane. Let's get a late checkout off the plane. Let's just sit here for an extra couple of hours and just really enjoy it. It's not the experience at all. So that's not something you can sell. And it's a seat, and it's a transaction, and it's basically to an extent, although not now, but it's a commodity type sale. We buy a seat, we sit in it, we get from A to B. It's transactional. Whereas I think if we're coming into a hotel environment, it's that sense of you're creating a relationship with the guest, which is far more engaged than on an airline. And there is an element of trust that you get when you create that engagement with a guest. And I'm talking about not just buying a room, but buying something alongside that. And it's that frustration, and we see it with different guests, and we call them difficult guests. But fundamentally, if somebody's cross because somebody's got the same kind of deal but for a lesser rate, when there's been that level of attribute-based selling around it, then I think it's kind of like it just kicks over into the disappointment mode, and it's just a human reaction. Some people don't mind. They're absolutely, Monica, you're right. They just don't mind. They're fine. They get it that progressive pricing and dynamic pricing is in the marketplace for that reason. But I think it also borders on that concept of fairness in pricing, and differential pricing is always going to have that element of we need to have the integrity in pricing that reflects kind of like what we want to offer to the customer at any one time.
I love how Beatrice has just said that we should sell proper prices on the likes of Amazon, Google, or OTAs, because everything after all is connected. Which we do. We all know we push everything out, but unfortunately all these people are very sneaky and have their own little ways of doing IP packaging, IP discounting, attribute discounting to gain the customers rather than allow it to come direct. So that's where we as hoteliers need to be a little bit smarter, and revenue managers, on how we dish the inventory out to them and share or, inventory. We did touch on that. God, I think it might have been episode 3 or 4 of Revenue Hacks. If you haven't seen it, go back. We do have our top tips there as well on inventory management and pricing management, for sure. Ali, I think you were actually on that call as well, which was great.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm almost certain you were. And another comment from Ina is that customers see airport travel and hotel travel is completely different, which Ali just mentioned. We can always look at the aviation for ideas in regards to revenue management, and actually that's where revenue management came from. It's no longer yield management. I don't like revenue management either as a title for it. And it obviously brings, different experiences and different expectations with the customer as well. We're almost out of time, which is always terrible because we could talk about this for hours on end. So before we wrap up, ladies, what are your top tips on progressive pricing for now, even just for now, for people managing what's going on?
I would say just be really, really clear on the psychology of it, and I'll just go back over those points because they were the ones I made earlier. So people do have a reference point for your hotel, and that really should relate to your overall value proposition. So if you're in this market now and you're finding yourself managing very, very low periods of demand, remember that to not lose sight of your reference point in pricing, because it takes a long, long time to recover from that. And the other thing is that the level of gain that that people respond to is not necessarily linearly matched to discounts. So don't necessarily offer huge discounts into the market when a smaller discount could actually create the same improvement in demand. So really try and understand the integration of the demand and response function, which is fundamental revenue management stuff, but don't lose sight of your reference pricing. Just keep hold of it on the pricing strategy.
Suzanne?
I would follow on from what Ali says, and I think that your price, where your pricing position is important. Don't deviate from it, and that includes when you've got staycation destinations that are really bursting with demand. Don't lose sight of the fact that come November and December, the bottom's going to drop out of that market, and if you're charging £500 a night for a room, which would normally be 200, that's not good. So keep that in mind, and your overall position, penetration pricing. It's actually a bit of back to basics. Penetration pricing, equal pricing, surround pricing. Make sure that your price versus value sits correctly within that matrix, and equally marketing. Think about using the basis of revenue management to really target the right audiences with the right price, with the right discounts, and the psychology behind the behaviour, and personalise it so that your sales conversion for the niche markets is higher. No kamikaze, blast it out, price points and e-blasts. Let's personalise and use revenue management to do it.
I love the way you said kamikaze, and I wish we said this ages ago, because that's what happened this year. I think everyone, when the hotels were given the dates they were able to reopen, everyone just went out with all these mad special offers, and it was kamikaze. Brands, independents, everyone was sending the same offer or a similar one, and I think that's just deviated away from the customer. Really, the customer has just gone, I've got too many emails, I'm just going to go online and find a simpler way of doing it, which means your book direct campaign should be strong. And if it's not strong, talk to Suzanne, talk to Ali, talk to anyone of the team, because we're more than happy to help you. There is a link on the bottom of the page there that will actually show you how to actually get in contact with us if you do want to get in contact with us. And also you can watch the old episodes of Revenue Hacks if you want to catch up on the back to basics that we've been running. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. We're going to obviously go further into progressive revenue management over the next few weeks, and hopefully we'll have Ali back on with us over the next few weeks as well. Ali, it's been great having you. Suzanne, it's been great having you as well. Olga, I know if you logged in to say hello to everyone on LinkedIn earlier, so if you're still there, hi, and B, we miss you. Huge thanks to Rita from WHTT, who's working everything in the background. She's only appeared once, but she is a woman of so many talents. And we will see you all next week. Thanks a million. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.